Hello there and welcome to Snow Country Stories Japan. I'm your host, Peter Carnell. I'm a tour guide based here in Nagano, and this is a podcast all about life and travel in Japan's legendary Yukiguni. In today's episode, we head to Yamagata Prefecture and on to Tsuruoka, an area of the Snow Country I'm guessing most listeners have not heard of, but it's one that we all should have. Home to the three sacred mountains of Dewa, or the Dewa Zanzan, something I discussed in detail in episode 9 of the pod, How to Die Well in the Mountains, Way of the Yamabushi. Tsuruoka also boasts a diverse and rich traditional food culture, reflective of its varied topography, its historical isolation, and cultural practices that are sustained and disseminated to this day, often through its gastronomy. In 2014, Tsuruoka was designated as a UNESCO Creative City of Gastronomy in recognition of that food culture, including continued agricultural practices and the use of heirloom crops and wild plants foraged from the forest and mountains. It was the first city in Japan to be awarded the status, and in doing so, Tsuruoka joined a network of cities around the world recognized for their traditional and contemporary creativity in the fields of gastronomy, craft and folk arts, media arts, film design, literature and music. In exploration of Tsuruoka's food culture, today I speak with Alexis Crump, Coordinator for International Relations of the Gastronomy Department in Tsuruoka. As Alexis and I discuss, the gastronomy of the region is reflective of its varied topography, with different food cultures and distinct areas existing within that UNESCO designation awarded to Tsuruoka. There is simply too much to cover in one episode, so apologies for anything we've missed. Food is a big reason many people travel to Japan, and the Snow Country is no exception to that. There's some fantastic food out here. So I should have jumped on to an episode about food culture long ago. I hope our chat whets your appetite to learn more, and for any foodies out there, I hope you put Tsuruoka on your list of destinations in the Snow Country. I hope you enjoy. My guest on the podcast today is Alexis Crump, Coordinator for International Relations of the Gastronomy Department in Tsuruoka, Yamagata. Alexis, thank you for speaking with me, and how are you?
Thanks for having me today. I'm doing great.
Now, Alexis, today we're going to be speaking about Tsuruoka, where you're based in Yamagata. But for many listeners, I'm sure it's the first time they've probably heard of Tsuruoka. So can you explain, where is Tsuruoka in relation to Tokyo and the other prefectures in the Snow Country? And if you wouldn't mind, how do you get there?
Sure. Tsuruoka in Yamagata is located north of Tokyo. And just when thinking about it in relation to the other prefectures in Tohoku, it is north of Niigata and south of Akita. So it borders both of those prefectures, and it's on the Sea of Japan. And to answer your question on how to get here, so there's a few different methods, but I would recommend, if you don't mind flying, I would take a direct flight from Tokyo right to Shonai Airport here. And the airport is located about 20 minutes by car from the heart of Tsuruoka, so it's pretty convenient using the airplane.
Now, it's interesting that you've recommended flying, because most people who are traveling around Japan, or most people that live in Japan, are going to be using the train system to get around. And prior to speaking to you today, you explained to me that there is a reason why trains aren't the best method of getting to where you are. Can you just go into a little bit of detail about that?
Sure. So it does take quite a bit of time using trains to get here. There's a few different methods. You can, go all the way up to Sendai and then take a bus from there, or train to Niigata, take the Shinkansen, and then take a local train from there. It is quite a beautiful route, but it does take over 6 hours. I think probably close to 8 in total. And being in the, Yukiguni, we do get quite a bit of snow. The wind here is horrendous, so the chances of the trains getting delayed is pretty high. But there is, no direct train, unfortunately, from Tokyo all the way here.
Because, as you explained to me, because of a lack of tunnels, they won't tunnel through the mountain.
Yes. So we don't have a tunnel necessarily from going through Gasan. There is a train that does go from Yamagata City to Tokyo, but not one that goes from Yamagata City to here, because of that reason.
Yeah, it's all very interesting. And how would you describe Tsuruoka as a place to visit and a place to live?
I would say, if you're the type of person who really enjoys the outdoors, and being outside, enjoying, all of the different things that nature has to offer, I'd say it's a perfect place for both living and visiting.
So today we're going to be speaking about Tsuruoka's celebrated food culture. But before we do that, would you mind sharing a little of your own story? Where are you originally from and how did you end up there?
So I'm originally from Ohio in the United States. And just to keep the story short, I came here through the JET program. I originally worked in the neighboring city for about 2 years as an ALT teaching English. And then I always wanted to be a translator interpreter. So while I lived there, I studied, Japanese quite a few times a week for in classes. And then I applied to be transferred to the city hall here and work as a coordinator for international relations. So I got that in 2021. And I've been here for about 2.5, almost 3 years now in Tsuruoka.
Actually, a number of guests that I've spoken to on this podcast actually brought themselves to Japan on the JET program, which for anyone who's not familiar, this is the teaching exchange program run by the Japanese government where they place you in schools all over Japan. For a lot of people, it's a real a way of entry to Japan and then can lead on to some fantastic other opportunities like what you're doing in Yamagata today, which is exactly what we're going to be speaking about. As I mentioned, Tsuruoka has a very celebrated food culture, which is reflected in the fact that in 2014, Tsuruoka was designated as a UNESCO Creative City of Gastronomy, the first such designation in Japan. So let's start there. How did that designation come about and why was it awarded to Tsuruoka?
So originally, how that came about, the kind of thought process of the city was they looked at the population of the city and noticed a trend that is pretty much happening all over Japan that I'm sure, everyone's familiar with, that there is going to be a decrease in the population. There isn't, enough people to work. So they were getting worried about the population decrease and decided that they had to do something to try and increase not only visitors coming to the city, but people looking for a nice place to live. So they looked to see what kind of things the city had to offer just naturally that they could improve upon to attract visitors and to use as a way for urban development. And they came to the conclusion that, gastronomy is something that is at the heart of the city, kind of, is the lifeblood of the city is how I would describe it. So getting that UNESCO designation kind of it took what was already here, innately here, and gave us a means of being able to kind of build upon that and make it more attractive to tourists and make it more attractive to people who are looking to find a good place to call home.
Yeah, tremendous. It will come as a surprise, I think, to many listeners, including myself, that the first city to be awarded such a designation by UNESCO in Japan was Tsuruoka, rather than a city like Tokyo or Kyoto or Osaka.
Yeah, people here are quite proud of, not only their history, but their gastronomic history as well.
Yeah, let's jump into that. So it's my understanding that the geography of Tsuruoka very much is part of the reason that it has such a diverse and rich gastronomic tradition. It's blessed with coastline, plains, and mountains, and as a result, there's a lot of diversity. In a relatively small area, there's a lot of diversity within the gastronomy of Tsuruoka. So is that correct? And how would you summarize the food culture of that area?
Yeah, I would say definitely. This is one of Tsuruoka's biggest selling points, in my personal opinion, especially in terms of gastronomy. Having so many different areas, mountains, the ocean, plains, rivers, and all of this available in one city definitely adds to the amount, not only just the amount, but the variety of ingredients that are able to be, produced here in the city. And how I would summarize the gastronomy of the city is, I would say seasonal and fresh are two very important things that the gastronomy here seems to revolve around.
You mentioned to me prior to today's interview that there are 6 areas within Tsuruoka, 6 distinct food cultures. This might be a difficult question to answer succinctly, but can you give me a quick overview of each area and what distinguishes them?
Yeah, I can try to do my best.
Yes,
There's
go for
going to be
it.
hard to touch on everything, not trying to, upset anybody, but the city itself is called Tsuruoka. But there was at one point a much smaller area of the city that was Tsuruoka City, the main area. And what that area is known for is hinagashi, which I'm sure people might have heard maybe from Kyoto. There is a type of wagashi or Japanese confection that has the same name, but they're very different. The hinagashi here came from originally from Kyoto and then transformed into something very Tsuruoka. Not to get too much into it, but in Kyoto, they're more used as a celebratory piece for the Hinamatsuri or Girls' Day,
Which we're
and they're made
celebrating
out
at the
of
moment.
right. So it works. We're on brand. We're in season, and the hinagashi here is not hard and brittle. The ones in Kyoto are meant to be displayed for long periods of time. You can even keep them for years at a time. Whereas here, because food at one point was so scarce due to the harshness of winter and the changing seasons
Mm.
sometimes didn't allow for uh, you know keeping food for too long. So the hinagashi were actually turned into something made from anko and an. So they're very soft red bean paste and white bean paste. So they're very soft and something that is enjoyed during the hinamatsuri here.
And so moving on from that area to the other, you said there are 6 in total. Is there something else which
Yes.
distinguishes each of them?
Yeah, so moving on to the next ones, I'll just, briefly touch on some of these points. So we have Kushibiki, which is known for their fruit.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main points there is that there are over 70 different varieties of grapes that are actually produced in this area.
That's
I
incredible.
haven't tried all of them, but I've heard that I probably tried about 4 or 5. I heard the rest are very good, but I somehow seem to miss the other, 60 varieties every year. And then we have the Atsumi area, which is towards the ocean. So, and that area has, of course, fresh, delicious seafood and also the Atsumi turnip, which is a beautiful red turnip. It's part of the heirloom crops that we have here, one of the 60. It's produced in the mountains of Atsumi, and it's produced using traditional slash and burn farming methods. So that is and that actually is said to be the oldest heirloom crop in all of Yamagata. I believe it's over 400 years old. And Asahi, the area of Asahi, which is deep in the mountains, they're known for wild vegetables and horse chestnuts, which, like hinagashi, is a traditional confection that we have here in the city. That one of the crazy things that I didn't know. I tried tochimochi, which is used from these horse chestnuts. And I went and visited the area where it was produced. And the little old ladies that were, running the place and peeling the chestnuts explained the whole process to me. And
Fantastic.
they told me, that it takes over a month to take those chestnuts from, they fall on the ground and they go pick them up. From that process all the way to being edible takes over a month. So I thought that was an amazing feat of ingenuity, taking something that it's the motto of the city, taking things that, would traditionally be considered inedible and then making them into delicious food that everybody can enjoy.
Yeah, it's incredible that these traditions continue to this day.
Yeah, that area, the horse chestnut trees that they have there have been there for a long time. I think over 200 or 300 years, those trees have been there, and the same area, the village that's out there, continue to take care of that forest and continue to harvest those horse chestnuts in September, and then they go through this whole process of soaking them, drying them, soaking them again, peeling them. It's for the whole month to basically have enough for the year to make this tochimochi that people just love here.
Great example of what I've touched on the podcast before with the Satoyama landscapes in Japan and the use of the forests for food, for subsistence, and the use of traditional methods. One thing you touched upon there, Alexis, was the heirloom crops that Tsuruoka is known for. And
yes,
in preparing for today's interview, the reading that I did said there are over 60 heirloom crops. This is vegetables, fruits, and grains that are not used in modern large-scale agriculture, but are instead grown and maintained by successive generations of local farmers. So can you just explain why are these considered important and how are they utilized in the local cuisine?
So we do have over 60 different types of varieties of heirloom crops. And these heirloom crops are a way for people here to pass on their culture and food culture to younger generations. It's a direct connection that these people have, the people of Tsuruoka have to their ancestors. So the crops that they're eating now and the dishes that they're eating now, using those is something that their grandparents, great-grandparents, their grandparents were eating. So it's a way for the city to keep their history passing on from generation to generation, not just through, word of mouth and stories, but through experiences like eating certain holiday dishes and certain seasonal dishes that they prepare at home.
And you mentioned there, obviously, it's also the propagation of these crops relies on that traditional techniques and sharing of ancestral knowledge, which kind of leads me on to a question I had for you, which is I understand that one of the reasons that Tsuruoka, again, was awarded this status was the cuisine that revolves around the practice of the Yamabushi. That's the mountain aesthetics that are practiced on the Daiwa Sanzan, the three sacred mountains of Daiwa, something that we covered in an earlier episode of the podcast when I spoke with Tim Bunting, who's a practicing Yamabushi in that area, who went into Yamabushi culture for us. So I imagine that aspect of Tsuruoka's cuisine, in addition to the use of heirloom crops and the gathering of forest vegetables, mountain vegetables, is another big part of this designation. Can you tell me a bit about that food culture of the Yamabushi and just why it's important?
How that came about is the Yamabushi monks used to train on the Daiwa Sanzan. We have a history of that for about 1,400 years now, the connection between the Yamabushi monks and the Daiwa Sanzan, as well as Shojin Ryori. And during their spiritual training, they would eat things from the mountain that they found, such as wild vegetables and other root vegetables that they could find. And the modern embodiment of that is something that the modern day person can enjoy now. It's not just kind of kept secret for just the monks or the practicing, Buddhist monks. Now you can actually go to the Daiwa Sanzan and you can enjoy that food yourself. And what you'll find is the cuisine consists of, as you mentioned, locally foraged wild vegetables found in the mountains. And the belief behind this is that by, training in the mountains and being in the mountains, consuming something that is from that area that you're in will replenish your body and spirits with energy from the mountain. So a lot of the times in that Shojin Ryori, you will not find meat, you will not find fish. It's usually just all vegetables, specifically in Tsuruoka, the wild vegetables as well as the heirloom crops will show up in our Shojin Ryori. And depending on the season that you go, it's a little bit different. Because the ingredients that are available are different, but it's delicious every time that I've gone. I've really enjoyed it. I recommend it to anybody that comes here to visit. Before you go home, you definitely have to try it.
So just to touch on, so it's not specifically vegetarian or vegan, but the diet lends itself very closely to both of those?
I've spoken to the chef there quite a few times, trying to get a better sense as to, is the cuisine specifically made to be vegetarian or vegan? But every time he explains to me that the concept is not necessarily to make it vegetarian or vegan, although that is one of the main principles of Buddhism is, pretty much not taking a life or not harming others, but tying it back into nature and basically becoming one with nature, consuming ingredients that you can find in the world around you, specifically in such a spiritually rich place as the Daiwa Sanzan or Mount Haguro. I've gone a couple of times and he's like, do you want to see where the vegetables come from? I'm like, yeah. We walk outside and I was out there for, 30 minutes or so picking the vegetables myself. And then I had the chance to cut them and see the process that was used to make some of the, dishes that go into it. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, you tell a great story. And I think in doing that, it explains that one of the reasons, I guess, for the designation, the UNESCO designation for Tsuruoka, the food culture really is fundamental to the local culture of the area. You can't separate the two, which I assume is one of the reasons it was awarded this designation. Something else you just touched upon there a couple of times was the seasonality of the food of Tsuruoka. How much does that influence, if someone was to visit, how much does the season influence what they can experience, what they can enjoy during different times of the year?
So for food specifically, with there being 4 different seasons as well as the landscape, both of those things really go hand in hand with creating not only a variety in terms of location, but a variety in terms of seasons as well. So there's a huge seasonality in the food that's found here. And I think that's one of my favorite parts. You can go to the store and there will always be something fresh that you can, pick up and make at home. And when you go out to eat at restaurants, they always have specific staple dishes that you'll see come with each season. As I mentioned, now is hinagashi season. So you'll see hinagashi, and then shortly, probably in about a month, you'll start to see there's a specific type of bamboo that we have here. So you'll see that it's called moso jiru or moso miso soup, which is specific to this area that you'll see in restaurants. But then once the season passes, you won't see it again for another year. So you have to enjoy it while you can. It's not like, Australia or the US where things are available at all times at the grocery store. You can't just, here you just can't go to the store in the middle of winter and pick up, some hinagashi or pick up some Atsumi turnips. You can get them in different forms, but you can't get them fresh.
So, Alexis, I know that seafood is also a big part of the food culture there. Something that maybe people don't necessarily associate when they think of snow country, but given that Yamagata has coastline, and the snow country areas of Japan are largely found along the north coast because that's where the winter storms come from. Can you just talk to me about Tsuruoka's seafood? What's unique about it, and what stands out for you?
There are a lot of different fish that you will find here. There's also seasonality in the seafood, which is funny. I mean, when you think about it, different ocean temperatures bring in different fish, but the seasonality of the dishes isn't just reserved to the land. It also is with the ocean as well. So we just had maybe about a month or so ago, we had the Kandarajiru Matsuri, which is the winter cod festival, celebrating using the winter cod in all of its parts in a soup. So the gills and the organs and shirako as well. For people who are unfamiliar with that is cod sperm. And you will find that in the soup as well. They really try and harness all of the bits of the cod, and it is delicious. I know listening to me talk about it, I'm sure people are thinking, "Oh, I don't know about that," but trust me, when you come to Japan, you have to try everything at least once, because if you don't, you'll really be missing out.
Yeah, let me interject there. I totally agree with you. Shirako is one of my favorite foods in Japan. And the first time I had it, I made that schoolboy error because it was tempura. And to me, it looks like tempura mushrooms. And so I put it in my mouth, and the flavor hits you. It really stands out, but it's a good flavor. And I asked, I made that mistake of asking with it in my mouth, what is this? And then I was told. But it doesn't stop me from. I order it when I go to restaurants now. It's really good. So don't let the idea of what it is. Is it specifically from cod, or is it any fish?
I know that I don't want to use the word harvest because that sounds wrong, but they get it from, it is acquired. We'll use a nicer word. It is acquired from several different fish, especially here in Tsuruoka. I've had it my brother came to visit, and I took him to a lovely restaurant, and he told me, he's like, "I'm not trying any shirako while I'm, visiting." I'm like, "But it's the season. You can't miss out on it." So I made sure, the course that we got didn't have anything in it, but there came a dish that was puffer fish, because tiger puffer here is also quite well renowned. It's very delicious compared to other types of blowfish or puffer fish. Is very good. The meat of the fish is quite subtle in flavor, but almost melt in your mouth consistency. And anyway, So the lovely One-san comes out and brings us this beautiful looking dish with all different types of puffer, sashimi puffer, and it had steamed, grilled, and then on top of one of the little sashimi pieces was some speckled things.
Hmm.
And you would think living in Japan, you're like, oh, that's got to be ikura, because they also have ikura from puffer as well. So my brother eats it and he's like raving about this dish. He's like, oh my goodness, it's so delicious. And here it turns out we asked the onesan, we asked the lady, oh, what was, can you tell us about some of the pieces here on the plate? And she gets to the little speckled things on top of the sashimi, and she says that it was shirako
Mm,
from the puffer.
got him.
And my brother looks at me, yeah, got him. He looks at me, he goes, I told you I didn't like shirako. I'm like, well, it's technically not the same. So yeah, but he really liked it, and he
Yeah.
had no complaints.
Yeah,
You
it's
have to
good.
tell them after they eat it.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It's good. It's good. No, I totally agree. So actually, and you've just kind of then actually hit on what my next question, which was I was going to ask you if someone would like to come to Tsuruoka, what's the best way for them to experience the food culture there? Is it local restaurants? Are there food tours, staying at the local ryokan? What would you recommend?
Right. So there's a variety of different ways that you can enjoy the cuisine here, the local cuisine. And I think that's a huge point of the city, that they're trying to make the cuisine more available to not only tourists, but also people who live here who want to go out and enjoy themselves. So you can go out to the local restaurants. And as I mentioned, they will have those seasonal dishes on their menus, and you can ask them about it. What would they recommend? What's in season? And they'll tell you. No matter what time of year you go to the restaurants, they always have in season fish, in season dishes. So if you want to have more of a relaxed experience, kind of take things at your own pace, I would recommend maybe looking up a couple restaurants before you come. We do have chef ambassadors to the city, or of the city, for our UNESCO events. And you can look up what restaurants that they're running and stop at those restaurants and have lunch or dinner. But if you want more of a structured experience, for those who like to plan things out, I would recommend staying at one of the local ryokan and choosing. They always have a seasonal course that you can order, and the course will vary. I made a mistake one time of the seasonal course is so delicious. I accidentally, instead of the 8 course, I ordered the 12 course dinner. And about halfway through, I was like, oh my God, I don't think I
Yeah.
could keep eating all this
Mm.
food. So that's another thing to be careful of, is to double check how many courses it is. And if you need to go on a fully empty stomach, or, if you're going to sit there and just enjoy, some of the smaller dishes as you go through. But the ryokan are a good way. Visiting the local restaurants is a great way. I would say with both of those options, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, and for anyone who's not familiar, ryokan are the traditional guest houses in Japan. And looking at the Tsuruoka website, it looks like there's no shortage of really good ryokan up there. Again, can you go into a little bit of detail as to where are the ryokan? Are there any ones that you would recommend? Any tips that you have for anyone who's heading up that way?
Sure, there's a variety of different ryokan and onsens here. So as you mentioned, it is quite hard to choose. The way that I would tackle it is choose areas that you would like to visit. Are you more of a mountain person? Do you like the ocean? We have pretty much, as I mentioned, a wide variety of landscapes, and in those areas you will find ryokan and these onsens. My personal favorite ones are located in Atsumi, the Atsumi onsens. Uh, Name drop Tachibana-ya and Bankoku-ya. Those are both great places. As well as in the Yunohama area, which is on the ocean, right there on the coast from the onsens and the ryokan. You can see the ocean right there. And I would say that staying at those places, there's a numerous amount of them that you can just choose from. All of them are fantastic.
Yeah, terrific. Yeah, I said I had a look at the website and it looked like there's a huge range, but also some really high quality ryokan up there. And in addition to that, outside of just the food culture and the ryokan that you have, it looks like Tsuruoka actually has offers a lot of reasons to visit. So, what else, Alexis, would you identify as in the main reasons? What else is to go up there? What else is on offer?
That also depends on what you'd like to do. As I mentioned before, there's just so much to do that I think coming with something in mind would be a good place to start. If you're into winter sports and you like, snowboarding, or you like being here, you like being in the winter, then I would say the onsens are great here. Winter sports are fantastic. So we have a lot of different ski resorts that you can go to. Both skiing and snowboarding is okay. Cherry blossoms are also amazing. And the amazing part of the cherry blossoms here is they're just as beautiful as Kyoto and some of the other areas of Japan, but there's no crowds. So you can kind of visit things at your own pace, have a picnic if you'd like to, relax, enjoy the scenery. We also have, as I mentioned, the mountains are great if you like hiking. I just did this past summer, I did Mount Gasan. I did the Dewa Sanzan actually. I started with Haguro-san, which is the first one. It's an easy hike, about, I think, 2,000 stone steps. So if you're not super into hiking, but you want to enjoy culture, nature, and get a little bit of exercise, I recommend Haguro-san. So I did Haguro-san, and then I did Gasan, which is a little bit harder. So for people who are a bit more adventurous, you can visit Gasan and hike that. That took me probably about 3.5 hours, I would say. Haguro-san, probably about an hour to the top. So not too bad. And then Yudono-san, I did Yudono-san. I would say Yudono-san was one of the most special shrines I have visited. And I've visited a lot of places in Japan. The shrine I'm not allowed to talk about. It's a secret, as you know. So you'll just have to visit it and see for yourself if you're the type of person who's interested in shrines and hiking as well.
Yeah, terrific. And obviously we're just coming out of winter now, but what are the winters like where you are?
Right. Typically, the winters here are quite harsh. We do get a lot of snow. We don't get the most snow. Niigata gets more snow than we do, but we still get snow that will pile up to about the bottom part of the roof, So people have to dig themselves out of their house pretty much every other day. And it used to take me 3 hours to dig my car out every morning to go to work. So that was fun. But yeah, it snows a lot. It's very windy because we have the Sea of Japan. But I used to not like the winter, but then I came here and I had a new appreciation for winter. The snow here just makes everything look very beautiful. And although it is cold, there's a lot of very delicious warm dishes, a lot of soups, and a lot of different dishes you can enjoy in winter, as well as going to the onsens. It's a very lovely experience when you see the beautiful snow falling around you while you're outside in one of the open air baths. So I've come to enjoy the harsh winters that we have here.
You paint a fantastic picture. So I think the point being that obviously while Tsuruoka has very much been put on the map by this UNESCO listing and the food culture is worth going there to experience firsthand, there's a lot of things in addition to that make it really worthwhile getting up there and experiencing what really is a true part of the snow country. So for listeners who are interested in just that, where can they go to get some more information about Tsuruoka?
To find more information about Tsuruoka, if you're interested in the gastronomy, you can go to tsuruokagastronomy.com, or for tourism, information on tourism, so things like where to stay and for guided tours, that will be tsuruokacity.com, TSUROKA city.com.
Yes, I always forget to spell things out. So thank you for doing that, because obviously sometimes the Japanese names are not that familiar. And I assume that you're also on Instagram, Facebook, all the social medias. That'd be easy to track you down. Final question I have for you before we sign off for today. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you? So I've not been to Tsuruoka myself. I very much would like to get up there. So maybe there's something I haven't thought to ask you, which you would suggest that something recommendations you might have?
The only thing that I would add in, I know that there are a lot of people who really enjoy, when they go to Kyoto or they go to these areas specifically to see the traditional side of Japan, try on kimono and enjoy the festivals and the food. I I love Kyoto as well, but if you want to enjoy the traditional side of Japan, I would come to the Yukiguni, come to Tsuruoka, come to these areas to visit. In Tsuruoka, we have a lot of really traditional events and festivals that tie into our gastronomy as well. So you can kind of get an experience of a two-in-one for a fraction of the price as Kyoto and with no other tourists around. So you really get to enjoy yourself, be fully immersed in the culture. If you're practicing Japanese, you get an opportunity to speak to some of the locals using the Japanese and you get to really enjoy Japan at your own pace. So I would recommend coming to these areas and really just enjoying what Japan has to offer for you.
Yeah, really well said. I think one of the things which distinguishes, I'm sure, a place like Tsuruoka, like many of the areas around here, is people are really appreciative if you go to see what they have there. Just last week, I was traveling for my job as a guide, inspecting some potential sites, and I won't name the towns, but I went to one town which is already very much on the tourist map. And it was very crowded, and there wasn't much interaction with locals. And if there was, it was very transactional. I went to another town 50 minutes down the road, which is, very, very beautiful, has a lot to offer, but nobody goes to. And every person I walked past on the street said hello to me, came up and asked me why I was there, where I was from. Now it might take a little bit of effort to get to Tsuruoka, but for so many reasons, as you've just explained, it's really worthwhile. So, Alexis, thank you so much for your time today. It's been very interesting for me. I said I've not yet been to Tsuruoka. I want to come up and dive into everything that you guys have up there. So thank you for chatting with me, and all the best.
Thanks for having me. Hope to see you in Tsuruoka one day and look forward to hopefully welcoming, some of the listeners that hopefully come to visit as well.
That's it for today's episode. A very big thank you to Alexis and Tsuruoka for agreeing to the interview. Should you be interested in learning more, or better yet, traveling to Tsuruoka, you can find more information by visiting the two websites Alexis mentioned. The first is tsuruokagastronomy.com to learn more about their UNESCO listing and the enticing food culture on offer up there. There really is a lot going on. Along with tsuruokacity.com for general tourism information. You can also find them on Instagram at creative_Tsuruoka. Tsuruoka is spelled Tsuruoka. Links to everything we discussed, images, and a map showing you where Tsuruoka is can also be found on the Snow Country Stories Japan website, that's snowcountrystories.com, while you can follow the pod on Instagram, Facebook, and X by searching Snow Country Stories Japan. My name is Peter Carnell. This has been Snow Country Stories Japan. I'll be back with that next episode in a couple of weeks' time. Until then, it's bye for now.